Hi there, it's Liane, and this week we're going to be carrying on making the slipper boots. I hope you enjoy the project. This week we're working on the lining, so I have stitched the front panel to the toe panel, the same as with the main piece of the boot, and then I'm going to put the back panel and pin it to the sides. Got on here that I have sewn the seam, centimetre seam, down the side of the lining. But on one side of the lining, and this is different to the main boot panel, I'm going to leave a 5 centimetre gap, 5 or 6 centimetres, depending on how bulky your fabric is. If the fabric is a bit bulkier, leave a slightly bigger gap because we're going to pull the boot through. So I will just demonstrate stitching this. I'm going to stitch to the marking, reverse, pull the thread over and stitch the rest of the seam. Reverse at the start and hold it in place. So I've stitched up to the marking. I'm going to just then make sure the needle is out. There's no need to cut the thread, just pull to where you want to start sewing from again at the next marking. Line, make sure the seam allowance is the same, and I'm going to line up the foot, set off and do a little reverse at the start again to secure the stitching. So restitching will look something like this. Secured here, and then just a long line of thread which can be trimmed, and then secured here and here. And then that's the boot lining ready to attach to the main boot. So I've taken the wadding piece and put it face down. This is the wrong side of the lining, the main boot fabric, and the right side of the boot fabric facing out, and pin or clip at regular intervals. If you're using the magic clips, I'm putting the clips flat side at the main fabric, because when we stitch the wadding can catch on the little teeth on the sewing machine, so I find it easier to stitch the wadding facing up. So this is a 1 centimetre seam, so I'll line that one up on the machine. Again, I always find it easier to start on a straighter edge and then come back around to meet. Just going to take a ruler and check that that's about 1 centimetre. just reverse or overlap the stitches at the end. Okay, so the wadding is stitched and fastened here, and then I've laid that face down with the boot. And I've lined up all the notches to do that. So again, I'm going to just stitch this boot panel to the base, starting on a straight line. The thing to watch out for here is because I'm going to be stitching with the wadding face up, the seams ideally need to stay pressed flat, but because you can't see them when you're stitching, they can sometimes get folded over. So tend to put a clip or a pin on the seam, making sure that it's flattened out. If you find the wadding is getting caught, just take your time to pull that away. And then as I'm coming up to this leg, the back of the leg, I'm just going to make sure that's tucked well away from the seam allowance. So I don't want to catch any of that as I'm sewing around the edge of the sole of the foot. When you get to the curves, my tips for sewing a curve is to point the right at the far side of the foot. Just keep that pointing at the curve and that should make it just flow quite smoothly. So that's the base of the slipper boot attached to the main part of the boot. And I've managed to keep the seams quite flat. So now I'm ready to attach the lining to the main part of the boot. Main piece of the boot, what I'm going to do before I attach it to the lining is just trim the seam allowances to about half the original width, and this just means that when we turn the boot inside out, the seams won't be too bulky. So just following that stitch line. And there's no need to add any notches to the foot, even though it's curved, it doesn't seem to need the notches. Trim the threads as well. Okay, and then we've already notched the panel here and trimmed this. I'm just going to look at these, and if these look okay, I'll trim them, but they don't actually look too bad. So probably leave those as they are. Okay, so I think we'll stop the slipper boot project there and we will carry on next week. I hope you've enjoyed the tasks for this week and I will see you. Bye bye.